Vacation plans, long commute, weekend at the cabin. Wherever you end up this summer, the Connector Idaho Daily News helps keep you connected to Idaho, even while you're away. Get the top local stories every weekday morning in just a few minutes. That's the Connector Idaho Daily News. Listen on your podcast app.
More Idaho Matters now from the studios of Boise State Public Radio News. I'm Gemma Gaudette. For the last 60 years, the Nature Conservancy has been working in places like Cougar Bay and Hells Canyon, Thousand Springs, even Heart Rock Ranch to protect everything from salmon and sage grouse and raptors and to find ways to conserve Idaho landscapes. The Conservancy is looking back at the work they've done in Idaho over that time and celebrating 60 years in the Gem State. So they asked Will Whelan to write a book about it. He spent 18 years as the group's government relations director in Idaho, and he has a lifelong love of Idaho's landscapes. So he's joining us now to tell us about the book, Connected by Nature, 60 Years of the Nature Conservancy in Idaho, as well as the history behind it. Will, nice to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you, Gemma. It's fun to be here. Appreciate you inviting me on.
So, Will, the scope of this book is pretty incredible, and you have a timeline that stretches back to 1965 when the Conservancy founded its chapter here. So how did you go about putting the book together?
Well, I went back and took a look at those early days when the Nature Conservancy was actually a really small organization. The Nature Conservancy now is a really large, very successful organization that's in all 50 states and dozens of countries around the world. Uh, but when it founded the Idaho chapter in 1965, it was actually a really small outfit. And it had decided that it should organize itself around local leadership in each of the states and connect to people who knew their landscapes well. So even though TNC is a large global organization, this is really an Idaho story.
Mm.
And the early days of the chapter involved all volunteers. And it was fascinating to go back and see how, as a small group, they started saving places like, as you mentioned, Hell's Canyon, but also up in Upper Priest Lake in the far panhandle. The really big moment for those early chapter years was in 1976 when a key piece of property on Silver Creek, south of Haley, came up for sale. Um, and Silver Creek is this famous trout stream. It's a spring-fed creek with cool water that's excellent for growing trout. If you go there the day, you'll see lots of birds or moose that wander along that creek in the high desert. It's a remarkable place. And TNC's long effort to protect that piece of property and then later the whole creek really established its reputation in the state as a competent, effective group that could save important natural places. And set the stage for everything to come.
When you just look at the timeline in the book, there are so many places that the Conservancy has worked on. I mean, we're talking the Silver Creek Preserve, Box Canyon, Flat Ranch, Upper Salmon Basin. I mean, I'm just naming a couple of them. Can
Uh-huh.
you pick pick one conservation project and tell us a little bit about that story?
Sure. I mentioned Silver Creek already,
Hmm.
but I'll skip to eastern Idaho and to the South Fork of the Snake River, which comes out of Wyoming. It's a beautiful big stream, one of the most valuable wildlife habitats in Idaho for native fish, wildlife, tons of birds. So after TNC did the Silver Creek Preserve, our phones started ringing. And people said, hey, we've got concerns about this place or that place. We think this would be an excellent project for you all to take on. And the phone rang about the South Fork of the Snake River at a time when there was a large marina, subdivision, and a golf course planned for the heart of the canyon. Um, and so the Nature Conservancy got involved in the late 80s with a citizens group and started working with the landowners there to put together legal agreements to protect the habitat, prevent development, and keep the canyon of the South Fork natural. Over
Mm.
the years, much of a 60-mile river corridor on the South Fork of the Snake has been protected, not just by the Nature Conservancy, by a whole coalition of conservation organizations working with the Bureau of Land Management and others in what I think is one of the most remarkable conservation achievements in Idaho.
So, what really stood out to me too is that this book, I mean, not only is it packed full of history, you have got some really incredible pictures in this book, Will. How did you put all of it together? I mean, where did you find all of this information and these pictures?
Well, that's a great question. We got lucky and we found a Nature Conservancy volunteer with a plane and a drone and an incredible eye for landscape photography. His name is Chip Caroon, and many of his photographs are in the book. But for the historical photos, I looked individually through literally thousands of slides to find, this is way before digital photography, to find these images of the people who made it happen and the way things used to look. It was so revealing. For instance, Silver Creek in the late 70s was very degraded. You can
Mm.
see instantly in the photos the result of decades of restoration on that creek. It looks so much better today. So the photos were really fun to work on.
Oh, I bet. So this history is really about more than just protecting individual places. I mean, the group over the years has also focused on really large areas and landscapes here in Idaho. Can you talk to us about the resilient and connected network? I mean, what is it and why is it so important to think about conservation this way?
Well, over the decades, the Nature Conservancy, that established its reputation as the kind of group that would go in or might purchase a piece of property or work with a landowner on financial incentives to do, protect specific places. It really expanded the scope of its efforts for much broader collaborations and started, doing some really groundbreaking science in looking at large scale landscapes and identifying those places that, first of all, were most valuable for wildlife and native plants. Where is that biological diversity really high? What are the hot spots? And then, most recently, it started thinking about how climate change will affect that map. We like to protect land for perpetuity for the long term, but we've got a
Hmm.
changing climate. So the resilient and connected landscape network is an effort to identify places that will be resilient to a warming climate. Where can we do protection work in landscapes that will not be as vulnerable to rising temperatures? These are often complex places, higher in elevation, where you've got low elevation and high elevation landscapes together in the same place.
So my understanding is that you're going to be speaking at the community library in Ketchum come Tuesday.
Yes,
Can you give us
yes.
a quick preview? And I've got about a minute or so left with you.
Sure. Well, I'll bring some of those photos we talked about
Yeah.
and do a deeper dive into the history and tell the story. And there were two things, Gemma, that I loved about writing the book. First of all, was doing dozens of interviews with ranchers. I talked to timber mill operator, people from all walks of life who got involved in these projects and for whom that was one of the highlights of their life. And the other fun part of it was to be able to tell the story of these fascinating places in Idaho, where they're rich in beauty and in wildlife and in plants, and to really make those landscapes a character in the book. So that's what I'll talk about next Tuesday night in Ketchum at the Ketchum Community Library.
Well, I want to thank you so much for taking time to talk with us. We've been speaking with Will Whelan, the author of the book Connected by Nature, 60 Years of the Nature Conservancy in Idaho. And as we mentioned, he will be speaking at the Community Library in Ketchum about that book. It'll be next Tuesday, June 30th. You've been listening to the Idaho Matters podcast from Boise State Public Radio. To stay in touch, you can find quick Idaho daily news every morning when you subscribe to the Connector podcast. If you're really enjoying this show, a quick rating or review on Apple or Spotify really helps other folks discover us, and we'd appreciate it.